Welcome back. I'm Kari Wilson, Communications Director here at Two Cities Church. As always, joined here by Pastor Kyle. And we are, I can't believe it, already in week 7 of our new post-sermon podcast.
Here we go.
Here we go. And with the 7th episode, we're actually hopping into a new series in 2 Corinthians. And so when you're starting something new, you want to have the most fun people for the party. And we've brought them today. Student ministry team is here. Justin Mormon, our pastor of students, or student pastor, whichever way you want to say that.
You say it, I don't care.
We can call you whatever.
That's right.
Okay, great. And then Tyler Aristamuno, our associate director of student ministry. And we're excited to have them here with us today. Justin and I go way back.
That's right. Vietnam.
I don't think I was born then.
Just go with it.
But just go with it. And Tyler actually was a part of our residency team, and he came on full time. Such a great resource to our church. Yes. But some things I know about you guys, because we just have to go there.
That's right. That's right.
We have
Always.
to go there. Tyler is willing to lay his body on the line for student ministry.
Proof
right here. If you are not watching on YouTube, which you should be because you've got to see this action, Tyler has this really killer brace on right now. Tyler, how did that happen?
Well, let me paint you the picture. It's middle school lock-in.
Okay.
We were down at Rise Indoor Sports.
Such a bad idea.
Staying
No, just kidding.
Some say the worst ideas come with the best of memories.
That's right. That's right.
We were out there
Hashtag
with the
student
students playing soccer. They had finished their tournament, and we had known which students had won. And so at some point, someone was like, hey, we should have a leaders versus the winners game. And against my wife's wishes, I decided I'd play anyway. And so got in there with my smaller
Wives
knees.
are always right.
And we were playing. I had an opportunity to score. So cut to the right, took a shot. Everyone watched the ball go in. They cheered. They looked back. I was on the ground, tore my ACL. So that was not as fun. But on the bright side, we ended up winning 4-2, and my goal didn't matter. So,
But willing to lay your body down on the
right.
line.
Absolutely.
A true student leader.
All the time.
I love it. And Justin loves to, as he endearingly says, poke the bear. And he's poked my bear.
That's right.
Multiple occasions. Justin, is there any...
Well, I mean, here's the theology behind poking the bear is let's disrupt a little comfort, a little control.
I need it.
Lighten up somebody who maybe didn't ask for that to happen to them. I don't do it to strangers. I do it to people that I know, and I feel like that life equity allows it. But
I've seen you do it to strangers.
Yeah, there's tears of it. But that's right, man. It's good to be able to laugh.
So it's funny. I always feel like we are like, as teachers, I used to be a teacher, they're like, you are like your students. You will become like your students. And I think we see that in student ministry because, I mean, you guys, you meet them where they're at on their level in so many ways. And these are just 2 examples of that. I know we joke around, but that's why you guys are so good at what you do.
We love it.
We love having you here. Kyle.
Yes.
I think it's important for you to take us back to 2016, fall of 2016. Yeah. What our student ministry looked like then. Where are we now? Where is God taking us? Where are we going?
Yeah, well, I can start. Justin can probably tell a little bit better because he's been a part of it for so long. Yeah. So early on, if anyone here is listening has been to the Weekender Week show, the 5-year anniversary video, and Ted Hill, one of our elders and early launch team members, tells the story of they joined the church and they had a couple kids, and basically I just had said, hey guys, your kids, for better or worse, they are going to be the student ministry. So early on, it really was a couple. I'm so grateful to our church at every season for some people who said, we'll be the early adopters. And so we had a couple families that said, early adopter, we want our kids to see and taste mission through being a part of a church plant. And we'll figure out the whole age and stage student ministry stuff. It started, I believe, at least my earliest memories are basically a big community group. Shout out to the Elams at their house. And that was middle school and high school together. Pastor Caleb, who was then our director of everything.
He's done everything.
That's right. His Swiss Army knife, Caleb. He was overseeing it. And so it grew pretty quickly from a small community group to a large community group to multiple community groups. And then Justin could much better tell the story of kind of going to that. I think we started maybe with a monthly gathering.
Yep.
Want to tell that story?
And you were still a volunteer at that point.
I'm still volunteering. Caleb gives me a call and is like, hey, heard you worked with students. Do you want to start hanging out with them a little bit? And I said, just as a volunteer at a previous church. And I said, sure. And, one of the first games that night at his house for a Halloween event was you blindfold students and you just put a giant rope around and you play Marco Polo, but on the ground.
Oh, that sounds
just
safe.
A few kids got clotheslined, but it was worth the laughter. So, but that's how it started. And Caleb's like, why don't you keep doing this? Because I'm not cut out for this fully. So that's when we had about, 25, 30 students coming, meeting at the Elams. And then it moved to once a week on Wednesday nights, taking some time off, having some meals together. And then it was 40. And then it was 45. And then it was another home. And then it was high school in one home, middle school in the other home. And that brought us up to when we moved into the two buildings down there. We missed the intimacy of the home because there's just something sweet when we're in the home. Is. But it also then allowed us to start incorporating worship into our nights when we were able to start doing ministry one night a week at the church. And it wasn't long before we outgrew those two homes. So we actually had to move everything up to the 854 Northwest Boulevard. And we've been off and running since. It just feels like there's been about a 30% growth every year. If we were 40 one year, we were 65 by that time the next year. We were 120 by that time the next year. And with that just comes leaders. We still have some OGs that were even volunteering before I was. So we're going on 6 years with some. So it's just been special to be a part of.
Well, I can remember, Justin, I know you remember this, but you'll know this, Kari, but our staff pastors get away. Yep. About every 6 months, we were getting away. One of the things we do is, man, where are we? What do we need next? And we're like, man, our student ministry, I can't remember the exact numbers, but we were like, man, we're just in a place where we think this needs full-time attention. At the time, Justin, I always love to say this, Justin was my weed man.
That's right.
Not that type of weed, but was working with weed man and working on yards and doing a bunch of other stuff and volunteering more and more. And I remember I called you on the way back from this retreat. I was up in Boone, and you basically said, "Would you pray about this? Would you consider making a career change?" And then I think that was on like a Thursday, and then Monday morning, knock on my office door, you pop your head in and go, I'm in.
Let's go.
And so,
that's great. That's
and really, it was such a key moment. Just to, we can talk about Tyler too, but just it's hard to find. I mean, there's every position in a church is not easy to fill with the right person who's got the culture and heart. But I mean, Justin, really, you were able to take the ministry at a very young age, emphasize shepherding, emphasize biblical care, emphasize Bible teaching, emphasize doing things that make you feel uncomfortable, but you need to grow up. All of that, and so it's been amazing to see. How long have you been here now? On staff full time?
4, we're going on 5 years.
5 years in August, right?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Right around that. Okay.
That's great.
Yeah.
I wanted to hit on just really quickly, you talked about moving to Northwest Boulevard and having worship every week. Man, has that paid dividends. I know we miss the intimacy of the home, but talk to me for a second about what we're seeing happening in the worship of our students and our student ministry.
Yeah, I think, and you can jump in anytime, Tyler. I think it's one of those where, you can have a guitar, and we did, and we could sing. But I can just think of like the first year of us getting to just start to do corporate worship. It was a lot of stiff bodies who are used to just I know the words and this isn't comfortable, and now it's moved into this is worship.
Yeah. And
that takes time, and it takes time to realize, like it does with adults, like you can move.
Yeah.
You can enjoy this, and I think that comes just with the maturing, and not just I just worship in my car and just at my house. And so that was just something that was new, transformative.
Yeah.
That took some time, but it has been one of the pace setters for just all the ways you worship, through prayer, through worship, through teaching. Yeah. And that was something that it happened at the right time. It happened at the right time, and it has just contributed to, I think, what we're seeing happen with the DNA of our students.
Yeah. I think when I came here, I came from a more charismatic church. And so when my wife and I started volunteering under Justin, we got home one night and we were like, we love the teaching, we love the community, these students are really in, and worship is awkward. But having, Zach Freed come on and really take ownership of worship, and actually having someone who's like, worship is what I do, and it's a little bit more than just the volunteer, which we love our volunteers, but that has then transformed to worship nights, which I think really unlocked that next gate for the students, where it was like the first night where we did only worship for an hour. They all went home and they're like, that was weird, and when are we doing it again? And I think that's when we started to see the buy-in change for a lot of our people.
It's good.
That's so good. You'll notice on this podcast, we do a lot of celebrating, a lot of remembering. And that's because we truly do believe it's important to look back to where God has taken us from, to see what he's doing, and to know that we can trust him in the future. And it's fun for you guys to get to know who we are, but it's fun for us, I think, too, to look back and remember.
It is. And, well, you just remind me, this is something twice a year I probably show this. We just showed it again a few weeks ago, and it's not Christmas time. But there's that scene in the movie Elf where at the very end, the dad is just moving his lips. And we all love Santa here, right? No, we don't. But anyways, the Santa can't get off the ground. And the son looks up at the dad and says, "Dad, why aren't you singing?" He goes, "I am singing." He said, "No, you're not. You're just moving your lips." Because there wasn't this buy-in. There wasn't this contribution. It was, I'm just here going through the motions. But then it's this moment where the dad's like, "Fine, I will." And he contributes, and it's that nudge. It's that next level. And we say that to our students. You're not just a consumer, you're a contributor.
That's good.
And worship is another one of those things. Like, I know this is a little awkward for some of you, but just try and begin to see what God does when you lose control of this type of environment too.
Well, speaking of awkward, nothing more awkward than student ministry, especially middle schoolers. But that's a story for another day.
That's right.
Why does it make sense for student ministry to step into a conversation about the conscience, decision making, our motives, all those things? Why does that make sense? Anybody can really jump in on this.
I'll go. As maybe we'll get to, it's such this sponge-like season of their life. And I see it with my 8, 5, and 3-year-old. I see how if one sees something in mom and dad, she starts doing it. And then the 5-year-old's like, well, I got to do it. And the 3-year-old starts doing it because she's just a perpetual parrot, right? But it's beginning to shape. And then the 8-year-old's starting to ask questions. And when I see that in my little children, I'm sitting there going like, that's just a microcosm of what we see definitely at all the other stages of the teenage years. And so that conscience, the things that we're going to be talking about, they are such sponges before we become us sweet adult calcified humans. And so for us to just, as parents or in this community or in a team or in a theater, like wherever that is where there's community, what is informing them? What is shaping them? Where are their influences? It is something that you can never really get back. It is that important for these years.
And this is off the cuff science, so it may be a little incorrect, but there's something about like that early maturation, like 11 to like 12 or 13. Their gray matter is kind of being fully established to the extent that it's going to be there, and then it's no more from there. So don't kill your gray matter. But uniquely during that time, it's a period of time for them to explore and specialize. And that's a unique season that you guys are getting to step into, and I think that speaks to what you're saying. But I do know a few facts about the science of this. As a former teacher, studied a student of counseling, studied some human development, and I don't know if you know this, but the prefrontal cortex, this is the thing that's responsible for our reasoning and our logical thinking. It isn't fully developed until you're 25. And yet we and parents, I think a lot of times, expect students to just be able to think like an adult. Let's talk about that for a second.
I think something that we tell parents all the time is you're going to have problems and you're going to have developmentally appropriate problems. Like I think back to going on a mission trip 2 years ago, and they have us housed in this gym and we're all there to spread the gospel. And it's really incredible to see some of these 12, 13, 14-year-olds actually speak Jesus in some of these settings. And then also they gave us sports balls in this gym with an exit sign that isn't caged. And so, of course, night one, 15 minutes in, it gets broken. And so our hosts are like, I can't believe you would allow them to do this. And I went, I can't believe you allowed this exit sign to not have a cage on it. Like, we're in a gymnasium and you put us in here with 14-year-olds. I'm not sure where the disconnect is, because there will always be those developmentally appropriate problems. And I think that's what we love to really engage with, and what student ministry really is we're tackling head on the things that they should be going through, so that we're not having to deal with as many of the problems that they shouldn't be going through.
That's right. Well said.
To tackle those when they're there, not angry or frustrated, but being like, dude, that totally makes sense why this happened. But let's talk about why it shouldn't happen going forward, is kind of that motto of coaching and teaching and wanting those developmental skills to grow over time.
Yeah, that's really good. Also during that time, so this is just a science chat with Kari, I guess, today, and then we'll move on. I just find it really interesting. Hopefully you guys do too. So because this is developing, they're operating during that age, like of adolescence, all the way through teenage years, primarily out of like the limbic system of the brain, which is actually what gosh, how do I explain this? It's responsible for like emotional arousal. It's connected to pleasure.
Yep.
It's connected to that flight or fight response you've probably heard about and maybe even experienced. And that's more or less driving the car for students during this time. Can we talk about that for a second?
I think knowing that without all the technical terms, but seeing and knowing that. And that's why we, again, try to, the language that even Kyle used last week, which we might say it again, is how are we not just telling them do Christian behaviors, but showing them Christianity in front of them. A joyful cadence in the home. That's introvert or extrovert. That's just trusting God or not. And so what part of the DNA culture of our student ministry has been is we need to take them places. We need to go places. We need them to be able to go on a journey. We need the adventure. We need the danger. Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot. It's the skill of being able to know and control and regulate yourself in a moment safely, responsibly, but not because you are always bubble wrapped and not around environments that you have to make those type of decisions. And we take them to spaces and places with us to kind of like, what do you think here? Trust and verify, trust and show, walk beside, walk in front, now you go. All those different situations, but I don't think you can just speak it to them and expect them to. We have to do it with them, show it with them. It's the language of our student ministry. If there's one bullseye right now, it's be doers of the word and not just hearers, thus deceiving yourself. And if we are not doing and just saying like my child has an A- in Bible class in our home, that just means they have the head knowledge, but not the real life presence outside there. The common sense, the awareness, all the things you just talked about there is only done if it's the real life experiences. And we know that many parents are taking that more seriously, some schedules. And so we're just making that be baked into part of our student ministry, which is we got to go on a journey together. You got to feel yourself fail and like, let's get up and try it again. And that's what parenting is. And we're just getting to help with that. But it is amazing to watch the things that we get to see as parents when our children, the lights turn on. And it's amazing to be there for all these families' children and to be there and be like, that light bulb just went on. Did you see that this weekend? Did you see them yesterday? They were the ones following last week. Now this year, they're the ones leading. And we are the front lines of that all the time. It's special.
And it's so cool because I think like uniquely, and for a long time I was like, what in the world is Justin doing? Are they like holding snakes and like, now we don't mean like snake handling, but like, and like doing these super risky things and like, what in the world? And I'm a very safety-oriented person, as everyone in this room would tell you. It's like my alarms are going off. But it's so important developmentally and spiritually. This season of life, they're the most attuned they're ever going to be to taking risk. The most.
Yeah, I think you guys do a great job. I mean, my daughter is in the student ministry, so it's personal. She's a sixth grader this year. But I told you guys this personally, but just to say it on the podcast, I mean, the amount of time that you and your team, 50-some student leaders, are spending, like, I mean, one, just, the average family is also going to community group on that night of Wednesday nights. So they're dropping them off at 6:15. I'll often get there at 9 o'clock, and there's still like 100 kids playing outside. And I'm watching you guys and your team play with them, engage with them. And one thing we've talked about before, I've talked about from the pulpit, is there is no such thing as quality time apart from quantity time. A lot of times parents go, I really want to have quality time with my kids, so I'm going to have that 1 hour with Johnny. It's like, it doesn't work that way.
That's right.
That's good.
And so, you guys do events like, hey, it's going to be 10 hours on all day Saturday, or this is a week-long mission trip, or this is a Guatemala retreat, or, mission trip. And in those moments, you guys get to, if we're talking about the conscience, if we're talking about the forming of the soul, that's when that happens.
Yes.
I mean, yes, it happens in the Bible teaching and in the singing of songs, but anyway, I appreciate how much time and energy our student ministry puts in creating a lot of spaces so that the quality time can happen.
We talk about it often, but those trips, those weekend retreats and the all-day events and the out-of-town trips, like, they matter so much. We really try and get our leaders on board with the vision of that too, because realistically, it's like 70 Wednesday nights
Yeah.
is what you're truly experiencing when you go on those things.
That's
It's
a good
over
word.
a year's worth of time spent in the course of 1 week because you're just microwaving it because you're constantly there. Students can show up and they can be whoever they really want us to think they are for about 2 hours.
Yeah.
But you get to
Well
some
said.
of those long like term things. You get to the mission trip. I promise you, day 3, I know who you are now.
That's right. That's right.
It's like, no, this doesn't surprise me anymore, or at least if it did, it's not going to surprise me in the future. But we get to the real version of them.
right.
And at the same time, they get to the real version of us.
Yep.
It's also really fun seeing our leaders have to be like, I'm going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to go step off by myself and have a little time with the Lord.
Yeah.
I'm going to say, is that time with your eyes open or your eyes closed? Are you tired or are you frustrated?
That's right.
And
That's right.
The doing life together with these students, it is so life-giving to a lot of our leaders that like they love it. I mean, Justin mentioned it earlier that we have some OGs on there who have been here as long, if not longer than him. But we really don't have a lot of turnover in our student ministry leadership
crazy.
team.
It's a blessing.
They come in, they're there with their students. Almost all the time they progress up the years with them. And so by the time a student, if they come in as a 6th grader, get to their senior year, theoretically they've been with those same leaders or at least a couple of those leaders for almost 7 years now.
Unbelievable.
And so it's like, wow, they know them. They're walking through it. And I think that then opens up the reality of we've seen where your conscience was. We see where your conscience is going.
Yes.
And then there's that element of trust, which I know we'll get to in the future.
Tell us about your student leadership team. How do you guys develop them? What's that like? How do you invest in them? What do you ask of them?
That's great. I think it's something that we continue to realize we have to even continue to grow in that. It's gone from sometimes, the language we've used this last year and even with our team is we're often going off of their skills as they walk in, but that could be a 22-year-old for the first time doing because they had an important leader in their life. Now they want to be that for someone else, or it could be someone that has a couple years under their belt, school teachers, nurses, this cross-pollination of a job where they also get to be with children. And it's like, I want to do what I love to do, but I don't get to ever talk about Jesus in these professional environments. Now I want to take it over here. And so that happens. But on the development side, it's now we're at a place where wherever they are, we need to continue to push and nudge them so that they, with their gifts and strengths, become their own unique shepherds of the children, shepherds of the students, because some are already that way, but some are young. And with that, it's come sit in on some of these surgeries. It's I'm seeing this, and this student just came up to me and confessed all this stuff. What I do with it, and it's like, let's go talk.
Yeah.
Is it going to be one of those where he's going to be brought in to talk about these things? We are going to reach out to the parents. Or is it one of those where we kind of give it back? Like, I think you can do this.
When we say missions is a microwave, but ministry, ministry to other people, especially people that are less mature in their faith than you or not believers, is often a microwave as well.
Yeah.
You see people coming in to serve these students that are growing massively in their faith. I can remember when I used to do assimilation, having baptism calls with people. They're like, no, I'm just not going to get baptized. And you guys walk with them in your student ministry as leaders, and you're like showing them a vision for that. And then they're getting baptized. And that's been really cool to see. How many leaders, though, do you guys have? I know you might not know an approximate number.
No, it's right at 60 right now. Yeah. It's right at 60.
Unheard of.
Just it is. And I think the national average for student ministries is right around 10 to 1 students to leaders. And right now we're resting-ish right around a 3 to 1 ratio, which is allowing us to have healthier knowing of the students. It's not perfect. There's different personalities, and it takes some. But that is something that from day one, week one, when I started this job, and we had 5 or 6 leaders as God, the only way that this grows is if we have enough to walk with the students.
Yes.
And that has been the pace from day one that God has allowed us to have, and that's going to be continuing what helps allow this to grow and go.
That's great.
Kyle, I think, looking back over the last 7 years of ministry here in Winston-Salem, there's been so many things just like this that feel unheard of that we're experiencing.
Yeah.
How does that make you feel as the pastor of our church? What responsibility do you feel when you think on those things?
Yeah, I mean, one, I've said this before, but I haven't said this today, is that I came to Christ through a student ministry. I mean, in large part, I came to Christ through the personal evangelism of Joe Ducko. Joe Ducko came to Christ through it was called 220, because they said that was the amount of voltage it took to bring you back to life. I don't know that that's true. I love it. But it was also Galatians 2:20, one of the first verses I ever memorized, crucified with Christ. Anyway, so you have to understand And I was a part of a very dynamic student ministry for 2 years. And so I came to Christ at the end of my sophomore year of high school. I had 2 years of being in a student ministry. When I was called to full-time ministry, I thought I was called to be a youth pastor. It was the first thing I thought of, like, Pastor Colin is the greatest. My life's being changed by this. I want to be a youth pastor. And then I went to college ministry, thought I wanted to do college pastor. Anyway, on and on. So I think, I feel a great responsibility when you start looking around and going, man, we've got 200 plus students coming around. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I don't know how big the average high school is, but you just start thinking, or middle school, I'm like, we're starting to have a lot of people. I'll tell you, there's a couple interesting things as a senior pastor, I'll tell you that I'm seeing. One, I'm seeing people come to our church because of our student ministry. Sometimes it's unbelieving parents who their kid is growing spiritually or came to Christ, and they're like, check this church out. A lot of times it was like parents who they're at a church and they're like, you know what, but whatever it is, our son or our daughter is thriving here. So I see it as our student ministry, primarily bullseye is we are ministering to the middle schoolers and high schoolers, but it's also a way that we're ministering to families. We always say you're only as happy as your least happy kid. And a lot of people, I think, coming out of COVID, really, I'm not thinking of any one person or picking on anyone. They just feel like they made a lot of decisions in COVID for 2 or 3 years that maybe have really made it hard on their kids. Oh, my kid was behind a screen, or he was taken out of school, or and so I've always appreciated that, like, while being very, how would I say this, like, being very godly and everything else, we're just a fun place where you can be yourself. And during COVID, I think our student ministry and our college ministry felt more free than the high school and college where the kids went to. So we're always trying to figure that out together.
I think what's cool is something you say a lot that's always in my mind is that the first 2 years after you become a believer is like the largest impact that you have as an evangelist, because people have seen who you were versus who you are now. And we are seeing that in such tangible ways in the student ministry. I mean, this most recent week, we had almost 15 like new students, brand new, first time, all came from the same middle school because without talking to each other, a bunch of the 8th graders were like, I'm inviting this friend tonight. And so they all just showed up together, and they're starting to really feel the sense of accountability for it. We've never offered like pizza parties for invite nights or anything like that. It's just they're so excited by the things that are happening, and Jesus has become so real to them in the ways that they're engaging with their fellow peers and their leaders that they're like, I want to bring my friends to it. I know like one specific is there was a student who was really nervous, brought his friend for the first time, a friend who's never met the family before. Like, he was like, Mom, I can't wait for you to meet my friend. He's so funny. Also, you're taking us to church on Wednesday night, right? And Mom's like, yeah, okay, that's what's happening. Drop him off, hang out, going home, driven home by the older sister. And in the car, he's just like, so is this what it's like all the time? Do you guys go to church like on Sundays? This student has never really been experiencing church before in general. And that student who brought was like, this is it. This is what they've been talking about. This is what they've been telling about. And so a lot of our student ministry grows, and a lot of those families who come who are unchurched or de-churched that all of a sudden are re-engaging is because their friends are the ones inviting their kids that are then like really getting it going.
It goes back to, Kyle, the first part of 2 Corinthians, you just challenged, where are we being bold? Where are we taking that risk? And the other night when I was teaching, I just said, some of you are sitting in here because your friend from your public school, your private school invited you to come here. That's right. Some of you are Christians today because they invited you, and some of your friends rejected and said, no, I'm not going. But then some of those people that invited the others are now the ones that are here, and some of those friends have been a part of the baptism. It's awkward at times, but it's middle school, high school. We live for the awkward because then you linger in a while and it becomes the normal. So, but it's something that we're seeing the students taste what it is to be in a relationship with Jesus. That's so good. And it's something that I didn't even have at their age. I mean, I had a version of it, not like this.
Yeah. One of my favorite stories is there was somebody, I won't name who it was, and they were telling me, they said, my daughter is thinking of going to Wake, and they live here. And I said, really? She's not going to go away? She wants to stay here, Wake? Wake's a great school and all that. He said, well, yeah, she really wants to stay at Two Cities Church. And so, like, somebody in the high school ministry saying, man, I've loved this church, so I love our city and everything, but I want to stay around here. And so when I think about our future, it's like you have to reach, we talk about this all the time, you have to reach the next generation. Sometimes we think that's, I don't know, depending on who you are, sometimes people think that's all those young people working. Yes. Or a lot of people think that's the college students. And yes. But man, when I think about, I don't know the exact stats, but it's very high percentage of people who come to Christ in high school, middle school. And then after that, the vast majority come in college that are left a lot of times. And so you guys are just on the front lines as the cement is wet but hardening.
That's right.
To do the hard work, And so you're giving a ton of people in our church, 60 plus volunteers, opportunities to invest. You're creating catalytic events, which you've already mentioned. And so and now what I'm really excited about, and you guys can maybe talk about for a few minutes, is just the way that, we've always been, I think our as I've understood our student ministry, you can correct me, it's always been a great place. Hey, you're a Christian and you want to grow, or your parents are Christians and they want to bring you here and you want to be discipled and cared for and have fun. But also, not that this wasn't always there, but there has been an increasing desire to reach students far from God, close to us. How are you guys, you mentioned a little bit, how are you guys seeing that happen? How's that, because we're obviously, I'm rejoicing on a baptism Sunday when, we're baptizing 35 people and it looks like 5, 6, 7 of them are middle school, high school students. Tell us about that.
Every week. Yeah, I think something to mention would be even like talking about your baptism class in a little bit, because how articulate it's been in the journey of, am I a Christian? What does that look like? And what do I do? What are my next steps? But I think about, one of our just hopes is just what you said. I had several times where it's like, how do we get into the places where people don't know Jesus versus just they have an experience with Jesus, so they go to another church and come over here, or are we more fun? That's not what we're ever trying to be about.
But you are fun.
Well, walking with Christ and doing life with Christ is fun, but it isn't because let's entertain. Here's Jesus. And the thing that to answer your question that I feel like we have a momentum is the students and the parents. And again, guys, we still are battling everything, sin of every type of addiction. All these things are in our student ministry. But it's so much more unique from my life experience when they are the ones coming forward, sharing and repenting versus getting caught.
Oh,
like that is
so
something
good.
disproportionately that we've seen that I'm like it's emotional for us. We're like, yeah, mom and dad, like this stinks that it showed up in your home, but I'm so glad it showed up now instead of them getting to 1920 away from you and this not having had an opportunity for us to work and come around them before they were gone. Because those are the stories where it's usually 4 more years longer, 5 more years longer. So there's like this celebration and this hurt. Exposed, this hurts, let's get to work. And we like that challenge. We love that opportunity. But to see students, we're seeing more Sauls to Pauls. And that really is because, back to what he said, we're having more. It isn't just public schools. I was homeschooled, private school, and public school. So I can poke that bear on all of them because they all need it. But to see how each one has some stereotypes, and that's why they're there, but to see how in each of those environments, they are all realizing not everybody I go to school with is a Christian who says they are.
Yeah.
And for them to be willing to realize I have to be something consistent. If I'm not verbally confident, my life has to look different.
Yeah.
And that is creating curiosity in some of those students to where we are having. So I would just say this: if people like to critique and criticize and say like, well, public school this, or that's where we're private, or that's where homeschool. Listen, that's the discernment and vision for each home's got to figure out.
Yeah.
But what we know is our population of public school kids in our student ministry has doubled in the last couple of years, and that was actually one of our goals because we want to get into the schools where the students are saying it's harder and starker here. They openly claim that, and we don't disagree with it. And that's something by us going to breakfast, to lunches, to FCA meetings, and just being there to be with those students has led to a large part of his team is just turned into us being there and then being like, why are you here? And they're like, can we come to your church? And they just start coming. I mean, it's happened repeatedly for the last several months. So I think it's an encouragement for ourselves. It's an encouragement to every student ministry in this community of ours to say, just go and be present. The ministry of presence has been so affirmed in these last few months with us to where even some of those teachers are like, why are you guys here? We have students that go here, we love them, and we just want to have lunch with them. Anytime we can be with them, we want to be with them. And it's communicating something different.
I love it.
Wow, we could talk about this all
You're
day
right.
long.
You're right.
And we
You're
weren't
right.
actually planning on just diving in this deep in this part two, hearing about the student ministry, but I think it was so worth our time. There are people that today have heard this part of the conversation.
Sure.
And either they're ready or the Lord is like pulling at that heartstring of like, okay, maybe I need to be a part of this. How can they get connected to your ministry?
Yeah.
Depends on if they're, a student or not a student. But for students, I mean, just come show up. It's going to be daunting. If you're out there listening right now and you're like, okay, I'm a high schooler, maybe I'm a senior, and it's my last year and I only got a couple months left, it doesn't matter.
That's right.
Just come, show up, walk through the crowd, and you will find somebody. Yeah. Something that Justin tells students all the time is you weren't born with any of your friends, unless you have an older sibling, but we don't count that. So since you had to make all of your friends at some point, we believe you can make friends here.
Yes.
And so for the students, it's just come be a part of it. We want to know you. We really try and know all of our students' name to the best of our ability. And when we don't, we make fun of ourselves for it. Because we do. We believe names are important. We believe that God talks about how important names are. And so it's one of the things that we highly prioritize and emphasize. And then when it comes to adults that want to be a part of it, man, if you have a student and you're like, how can I get my student involved and I want to be a part of this? There are a lot of ways to help in different things, but we super value having third people in third spaces, having people that can come in and be these mentors where it's like every parent wants to believe that their kid is the one that tells them everything. But realistically, even a trapeze artist has a net underneath them when they're performing. We want to be the net. And so if you're an adult out there, you're a college student, or you're just like, man, student ministry impacted me, or I didn't have one, but this sounds amazing. Come help us be the net. Come help serve. You're going to give up a lot of time. I'm just going to forewarn you. But it's all worth it. Because every leader that we have that starts, and you asked earlier what the bar is, it's like coming on our Wednesday nights and making one of our extra activities. We now have leaders that are meeting bi-weekly with these DNA groups out at coffee shops, out at restaurants, because they can't get enough of it.
That's great. And you can email them at justin@twocitieschurch.net or tyler@twocitieschurch.net. You can also find them outside of our services every single Sunday. Right. And they would love to meet you, to talk to you, whether you're a parent, a student, or someone who's interested in just serving and being a part of the transformation that's happening in our student ministry. So thank you for sharing about your ministry. We're going to transition now into really talking about the text and the sermon, how that connects to your ministry, how it connects to the life of our church. So let's open up our Bibles. We can't not open up our Bibles on this podcast. Justin, would you read 2 Corinthians 1:12 for us?
Absolutely. For our boast is this, the testimony of our conscience, that we behaved in the world with simplicity and godly sincerity, not by earthly wisdom, but by the grace of God, and supremely so toward you.
Man. Kyle, you covered a lot of things about the conscience in your sermon. Can you just briefly just give us the best quick definition of that, and then we'll just launch into
it's
the rest.
A couple things. One thing I said, it's a soul's warning system. It's the internal witness God gives us. The best way to think about it is it's the thing inside. Some people call it a voice, a feeling, but it accuses you when you do something wrong, and it approves when you do something right. And so you do the right thing, and your conscience goes, man, even though I got a hard time for it. Like this is I talk about this in the sermon, but it's amazing to me how much Paul talked about his conscience. Because you got to imagine when you're suffering a lot, when you're in prison all the time, when you're rejected by your own people, it's like you got to go, either I'm wrong about the, or like, am I wrong? Am I doing something? And he kept going back to, I have a clear conscience before God and before man. Good. And so I just think the conscience is, we talk about this in the sermon, but it needs to be informed by Scripture, and we should never go against it. Those are the kind of the two rules of the conscience. So
you talked about too, and I think this will really launch off our discussion, how we really have three lines of defense. First, we have our conscience, then we have our family, and then we have the church. How do we see this playing out in our age and stage ministries?
So important. So, what I was sharing is basically the idea that the first line of defense God gives us is our conscience. You can see it on a 3-year-old. They know, and as again, nurture, nature, we can get into all that. But basically what happens at some point, usually in middle school or high school, certainly for me, middle school, you begin to go against your conscience. Maybe you're hanging out with the wrong group. And what I say is the role of the parents, the role of the family, it's God's second line of defense to basically go, Timmy, Tommy, Johnny, Jimmy, you know what you're doing is wrong. And actually, we've all had that situation before, and sometimes it will lead to tears. But if somebody confronts you about something you know was wrong, you will normally tear up. If you don't get overly defensive, you'll be like, oh my goodness, I know this. I was afraid I was going to get caught, or I've been telling myself this is so dumb. And so the second line of defense is the family. And then what I said, this is why student ministry is so important. The third line of defense is the church. And we see this. It's like, we see a family that gets overwhelmed or something, and they say, yes, we're primarily responsible for our kids, but, Susie is this or Sally is that. And it's like, all right, well, with your permission, we will come alongside.
That's right.
And what I warn in the sermon is actually, you don't want to go to the fourth one. So it's conscience, family, church, and then state. And you don't want, that rarely happens. But when it does, it's because they either ran through or did not have the other ones.
Yeah.
This is why, there's a lot of fatherlessness of men in prison. It's like they also didn't grow up in church. It's like, okay, well, you didn't have the family and you didn't have the church. And so when you kept going against your conscience, you met the state.
That's good.
That's good.
It's a very helpful paradigm just to think about the different ways God tries to protect us.
Yes.
Well, and I think that's the way our age and stage ministries are really set up too. Repping a college ministry shirt because I don't have a student ministry one. You guys
We'll
need to give me one.
Come on.
We are working on that,
That's
I
right.
think.
That's right.
But we love our age and stage ministries, and they really operate. When you said this point in your sermon, I was like, this is absolutely perfect. We say in our kids ministry, we're partnering with parents to raise a generation in Christ.
Yes.
You guys are raising up the next generations of students to be followers of Christ. How are we doing this? How are you guys acting as that third line of defense? How are you partnering with parents to help navigate this tricky season in the life of our students?
Yeah, I again think it's us. It's tough just on Wednesdays. Wednesdays is this, let's come together, let's break up midweek, let's sit under the word, let's have some fun together, let's talk, let's catch up, because there's the social component to the night, but it's also for 25 minutes, can you lock in? Can you battle your tendency to be distracted by the squirrels? And can you just focus and lock in? And our student ministry is largely taught off of what was taught on Sundays. And that allows a second opportunity for us to focus in, renew. Remember what we heard Sunday? We're going to bring it in even a little bit more concentrated juice tonight. Then we're going to break up into groups, and you're going to get a chance to talk and share. And then there's more time to hang out. And I can't tell you how much of our times of confession or walks, man, a big language we use in our student ministry is parents, you've got to learn to go on the metaphorical walks with your kids.
Yeah.
Front to front is awkward. Side by side. I could be in the car, on a drive, listen to music.
Yep, that's good.
The skill of the walk
really
with
good.
your children will change so much if you bake that in early. Because it's time to go for a walk. They might even feel the guilty moment, but it's like, I know I need this because there's the good walks too. But us being able to just have a place where students feel safe enough to get into the hard things. We use the language in our student ministry a lot. If Kyle primarily on Sunday drives 100 miles an hour, whatever the topic is in the Bible, whatever is normally the blush-worthy thing that the Bible talks about, where me growing up in student ministry was we talk about lust one time a year. We talk about the hearts one time a year. We get on every subject 7 to 8 times a year.
Yeah.
Every time. And so instead, we drive 100 miles an hour with our high school students. It's talked about. We're going to talk about middle school. We drop it down to 80 because they don't probably need a whole service on divorce.
Yep.
So we'll mention it. We're not going to shy away from it. But then we're going to linger on like quality of friendship. What are you looking for? Relationships. So anyways, that's, I can see your eyes.
The culture that we're trying to create, and I think this is helpful within the family, within other areas of the church, in all situations, is we really want it to be real answers over the right answers. I think a lot of times when we're talking with people, we almost want them to tell us the right answer, so that almost when you're walking through suffering with somebody, when they tell you the right answer, it's like your like golden ticket or hall pass to be like, I don't have to walk through this with you anymore. Whereas when the real answer comes out, it's like, this is like much more messy than we thought. And something that we tell the middle schoolers, the high schoolers, I've told this to my like adult community group, is we live in such a cancel culture. I want everyone to have permission that you can take back anything you say, because it's way more helpful when the words actually come out.
Yes.
And then you can rearrange it in the air. If it comes out and you're like, that didn't make any sense and this was not helpful, it's
that's
like, fine.
That's good.
But get the words out there and then rearrange it in the air, because we want to know what's real.
That's right.
We're not waiting and expecting this polished answer. Like, get it out, fix it if you need to, and then let's work from there. And I think that's what's allowed our students to want that.
That's so good too. I mean, even in verse 12, he talks about how we've behaved in the world with simplicity and godly sincerity. And that's there right there. We're not going to do it perfectly. We're a fallible human beings. We've been broken by sin, but God is working within us. And the best that we can do is just trust the Lord, be obedient to him, be real about who we are and what we're dealing with.
And one more thing to add on to what you said is, student ministry has 3 components: our leaders, which we just talked about, the students, and the parents. And it's like they all get different amounts of our time, but they all aren't healthy if they all aren't healthy. Yeah. And so the relationship with the parent is, we're here, you got to come towards us. Just like we said, like what the church doesn't know, we can't help. I had a mom yesterday say that. Kyle said on Sunday, if we don't know how to help you, then how can we help you? And she's like, can I talk to you about my daughter? You know, so it's that moment of like, how, so parents, please come towards us. And we're open. I think, again, and we might get into more of this, it's the, how are we showing them? Yeah. Parents, how are you showing them? We're going to do our best to show them. We want to support you, not go against anything that you are doing at home. We lead with honor your mother and father, even if we cut the apple differently. We want to lead with that.
That's good.
But where are we going? Just a quick story from our most recent trip to Guatemala. You know, more quiet family came with a father and a daughter. And we're at the end of the week, and it was just a spiritually tethering week, hard things, climbing up mountains, on horses, walking into strangers' homes, telling the gospel. And the father looks across at his daughter in front of the whole group and says, I feel like I just watched my daughter grow 6 months of life in 3 days. Yeah. Spiritually, confidence, fear crushing. And it's like, that's the bullseye. That's why we go on these trips. It's good. And then it's like, parents, fight for this. Because every parent was there like, this is a core memory. This was a touch the stove I'll never forget. With him, with each other.
That's good.
Confidence built, fears crushed. That means anxieties are dying. And those are the types of weeks that we are trying to incubate, facilitate, put on the radar for our families to consider.
Yeah, that's so good. I was just thinking about this too. We talked a lot about students and their consciences, but a lot of what you probably are experiencing parents struggle with is wrestling with their own conscience about how to raise their child, how to take off the training wheels.
Yeah, I know. I've said this many times, and I think many times on the stage, but I think, you know, Justin, you and Tyler, you guys have some of the hardest jobs, and I've always kind of tongue-in-cheek say, because you have to deal not just with middle schoolers and high schoolers and from 6th grade to 12th grade and all that transition, but then you have to deal with parents, and not just deal with shepherd, love, respect, honor, work alongside. And the issue is, you know, in our church, in any church, you have everything from the, you know, if I use the categories that I normally use, you have the overly religious parent, maybe. Okay, I'm not thinking of any one person. And this is the person who you're struggling to get them to let their son go over on a one-night retreat because they're not exactly sure if someone's going to have a cell phone.
Yes.
And that's one level of it, that extreme. The other extreme that, you know, I've heard about and seen in the past is like, then there's the whole, I mean, honestly, the worldly parent. They're just worldly. Academics, activities, athletics, you know, amusement. It's all about that. And it's just like, can we get you to value your child's spiritual life? And so anyway, it just, can you guys talk about just how, I'd actually be interested in general, what are you seeing in parents in this generation? Like, what are they, you know, safetyism has been talked about, but what are some characteristics of what you're seeing as you're dealing with parents? The good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, I think coming from the guy who, if you're watching on YouTube, looks like a child.
Back in the day, I did think you were a student. In
most people still do. But my biggest encouragement to parents is, if your desire is for your child to be coachable, you need to come to a place where you're also ready to be coachable.
Amen.
That is, I think, one of the hardest things is like, we've had conversations, and some of maybe not the win conversations, but the harder ones that then we get to debrief and be like, so what do we do now? Is when a parent's like, here's my problem. And we're like, well, here's what we think. And they're like, no, give us something else. And it's like, okay, I don't know what else you would like me to give you. Because coming from the outside, maybe having the fresh eyes on this, here's what we think is actually the best. And I mean, you nailed it, Kyle, in the sense that the parents are a huge part of the ministry, and Justin alluded to it too. I mean, we're doing ministry to people who are not the primary decision makers of their home. Yeah. If we don't have the buy-in from the parents, then they're not going to get driven to stuff. Yeah. They're not going to be brought over. We're not going to have the trust of things. I'm meeting with a student next week whose mom is like, hey, I'm going to come on my lunch break, drop them off at the church with you guys, go to a meeting, come back, pick it up. Yep. If we don't have parents who are like, I'm willing to go in, then we're not going to have those moments with a lot of these students. Maybe some of the juniors and seniors in high school, because they can drive themselves.
Do you guys find that what percentage of your student leaders are parents? Now, I know the parents does not serve with their kid, but still, like, would you say?
We have that are in our student ministry currently very few.
Okay, so it's not a lot of parents. It's going to be a lot of. I've been there before. It's a lot of young singles.
We have
15 now.
Yes, we have married couples. Yes, that are in there, but some of them that don't have students in the student
That's
ministry.
what I'm talking about. Yeah, you have a lot of young families that are helping, but I'm saying not many parents that have kids in student ministry are also.
That's right. Yeah.
And I get that. A lot of students may say, "Mom, Dad, I need a space where you're not there,"
and they know that.
Yeah, and I think another thing, and Dr. Moeller, who will be here in November. It's a long time ago I heard him say this, but he said that I don't know exactly what he's quoting, but he said when they look at students who walk with God in college versus students who don't walk with God in college, both having been in churches, good Christian homes, they said again, causation, correlation, but what they think is the difference is they had one person who was a spiritual leader in their life that wasn't their mom or their dad.
Yes. There's like
and
research
so,
on
that's a big deal. And so
research.
just to go, and I've always said, I thought you guys, and I think it's a prophecy that's going to come true. I think in the next 10 or 15 years, you guys are going to be doing more weddings, you and your team, than anybody else, because everybody wants their youth pastor to do their wedding. Yes. It's like, why would I not? He was with me when 6-8 years, and everything that I learned about dating, we talked about there, and so you guys are you're making a deep investment that you're going to be seeing the fruit of for years.
Yes, and to your question and what you mentioned, Kari, too, is we use the language we were talking about it is we all put parents, I would just say encourage all parents. We put on our calendars, our Google calendars fill up. Every parent is like, man, we're just everywhere, all over the place. This event, which is okay. That's the world we live in now. Not everything's in our backyard. Everything goes right into the calendar. Our rehearsal schedule, our sports schedules, when we're going on vacation, the Carolina team that we're rooting for, whichever one that is. Hey, parents, what is your spiritual calendar for your kids?
That's so good.
Well said.
Well said. Isn't it Sunday and Wednesday night? And it's like proportionally, that's like school and those events are 35 hours a week for your child.
Yeah.
4 hours of spiritual drop-off is not enough. So where does it drip into your calibration of your marriage of like, every child might have some things that are doing uniformly. Yeah. Other times it's like we need to sit down monthly and be like, where are they? Yeah. Regular calibration on what is there, how are we casting vision?
Yeah.
How are we not just being a person of, no, you can't do that till you're 18. No, you can't do that till you're 16. Casting vision with your no, as language Kyle has used before, which is so big because if you are just saying, I already told you can't do that till you're 18, whatever that thing is, date, watch that certain type of thing, whatever it is, then they're like, okay, I'm going to go ask other people questions because they're not stopping thinking about it. I promise you, they're not stopping looking.
May not be the people that you want them to ask.
Yeah. So I just want to say that challenge is, oh man, what is our spiritual calendar? Yeah. Not just zippering our meals, not just Christmas time. Yeah. What does that look like for that for each of the students in your home?
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, one of the things that I talk about a little bit in my sermon is, because Paul's, in this chapter, Paul is basically, at the end of it, defending his ministry plan.
Yes.
Yeah. So one of the things I talked about was, Paul had a ministry plan. And you're serious about something if you have a plan.
Yes.
Like if someone's like, I'm going to lose weight, and you're like, what's your plan? Like, and they're trying to think of it, you're like, you're not going to lose weight. Right. But if someone says, this is a very common one, I'd like to be more romance in my marriage. Really? Well, what's your plan? Well, then it's not happening. And so I think what if I could speak for you guys, can correct this, but if I could speak for the student ministry, it's almost like we're saying, parents, we'd like you to have a plan. Yeah. Plan for yourself. And here's the beautiful thing about, I think, that's what I love about a great church. I'm like, a local church. It's like, we'd love to be part of the plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so when I'm like, man, we do a couple other things. Addie's my daughter's going to a camp, Camp Crestridge this summer. Anyway, we do some things outside of two cities, and obviously a lot in our home. But to us, it's like, man, to have the staple of Wednesday, to go, all right, guys, mission trips on the calendar for us. Saturday. I can't remember all the titles for your guys' stuff, but just if you get into those listening, if you get into the student ministry, I mean, it's not just middle school events and high school events and full student ministry events. Sometimes it's like, the 6th grade girls are baking, and I love that. And it's like, okay, there it is. That's another event, and it's great. It's like, man, Addie has so many people investing. I'd also say, just this came to my mind because I'm thinking about my own daughter. I think if you can get your kids serving in our church, and this is not like a shameless plug because we're doing fine on serving, but I'm just saying, I'm having lunch yesterday with a member of our church, and she's like, I serve in kids with your daughter.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so we're having this conversation. And she's telling me about Addie, and she's telling me about a conversation that she had. Anyway, and it's just like, man, now Addie has this lady in her life.
Yes.
And she's learning this. So there's nothing. I'm not saying two cities, but I'm just saying in general, there's nothing like the local church.
That's huge.
And you get your kid in our student ministry. We're not saying it's going to solve every problem.
Right.
We're not saying that we're the only show in town. We're not saying that there might be seasons where it doesn't work, whatever.
Right.
There's all those airbags. But we're just saying, man, I think we have created the Sunday service, the serving teams, and then with you guys, you build in with the genius of the student night is it's long, but you guys build in the gathering and the groups together.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys create what we talk about. I don't think I've talked about a lot on Sundays, but you really can create that camp experience to where, it can feel like, man, I went, I had a lot of fun, I heard a great talk, and then, after camp, I go to the bonfire.
Yeah.
And I sit with my 3 or 4 leaders of my 7th grade boys group and the same 12 or 13 guys that we've been walking together for 2. I mean,
Yes.
there's like nothing better than it.
Yes.
And there's just it's so exciting. It's, I guess what we're trying to say, this isn't a recruitment strategy, but we're like, if you're listening, it's like, man, don't miss out on this.
Yes.
And push through. You guys are good. It's like push through. Everything's awkward when you started at first. Everything.
Yes.
And so we're going to be the type of church that we're not going to say we told you so.
Yep.
But we would be so glad, even if you're like, okay, I should have done this 4 years ago, and now I've got a 10th grader. It's like, well, all right, let's go. We still got 2.5 years left. Let's go.
That's right.
I think this is something really important, parents. If you're wrestling with your conscience, you have to wrestle with the fact, are you working and hoping for your child to be successful? Are you hoping and praying for their salvation?
Yes.
And in the decisions you make
Yep.
and the things you're putting on the calendar, it's going to show the true nature of your heart.
Yep.
And I'll tell you what, being in a successful career, making lots of money is not going to be the thing in the place that you want them to go.
Yeah. I mean, the things God uses, we say this all the time here, is His Word, His Spirit, and His people.
Yeah.
And we're trying to create as many environments as possible. Whether it's this, like I just made a joke about, like a bake-off at someone's house, or if it's a weekly event, or if it's a big fall retreat where I got to drop off Addie at that and see that. I'm like, I'm going up there going, this is going to be incredible.
Yeah.
And the energy and how excited you guys were, how excited the students were, how excited people who'd been there before were.
Yes.
How excited the leaders of the student. And it's just like, there is so much energy in our student ministry. I want people to know that.
Yep.
And there's, whether it's I'm dropping off and they're playing 9 square outside and shooting, bringing the basketball courts out or basketball hoops out and shooting. There's a huge investment that goes into it, whether it's a whole nother worship team, whether it's the 60+ leaders, whether it's your guys' commitment in midst of being in another community group to invest in another night of your week. And so we're just grateful for the student ministry. And I maybe I have this question. What's it been like to take over the 854 campus? Tell us about that for a second.
Man, I think it's so those 2 buildings now they're still kind of in the surgical stage, but I believe what it's going to allow us to do is to create some more homier environments that is more, I mean, here's just a simple truth. We're in there and you can still sometimes feel, even in the worship room, I feel like still sometimes there's just a little bit of like, this is church on Sunday. And there's a little bit of the stiffness for some students because this is a different space, but we're in it again on Sunday. And one point there is we say to our students is, you are the church. This is not JV church we're playing here. This isn't a different curriculum. That's why we go off of what's taught on Sunday so they can learn the Bible now and not just be like, we can't talk about that yet. Yeah. So that's already a symmetrical part of our church because they are part of the varsity church. But now that space is going to be, I think one where it's like a little bit of us naming it, a little bit of us. These rooms are going to not be quite as plain. They're going to, again, be like, this is home. And this is a space where not just on our Wednesday nights, but they're going to be able to start using that for, let's come early. We already use it for some studies for them to show up. We're going to open it up for earlier hours, particularly during the summer. We were talking about having a day where we're just going to have it completely open one day. Students show up. If you want to play basketball, you want to hang out, great. If we want to get into some topical discussion during this block every week, we're going to.
I love it.
It's going to be more
amazing.
of a, it is. It's going to be more of a student center of study, know the Word of God, and let's still play together. And that to me is why it is not a fun thing. It is. This life is fun. This is going to give us an environment for it to be just longer and more. And we are pumped about that.
Well, we're running out of time here and this conversation could be interesting for like 2 more hours. Let's be honest. I mean, anytime the student ministry is in the room. But as we come to a close, I think this last verse in 2 Corinthians 1 just really is like almost like a new motto for your ministry, if you want to take it. Not that we lorded over your faith, but we work with you for joy, for you to stand firm, in your faith. And you guys are doing that in your student ministry. Just want to honor you in that. As we close, you're doing this hard work. You're putting in this labor for the joy, for the establishing of their faith.
Yes.
What hope do we have for parents, for you guys, for students on the other side of listening to our conscience, listening when the Holy Spirit is speaking to us, digging into these really hard things? What hope do we have? What is God going to do on the other side of all of that?
I'll go. Okay, good. I think I run into parents who have new children right now, and they're like, we're scared.
Yeah.
The world feels daunting. It feels dark. And I just stand in that. I get emotional because the light gets brighter in that.
Yeah,
that's what
right.
light does. It just cuts through it. And Christ has always done that. And he always will.
Amen.
And we're not nervous. And we're not scared. We live for this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so it's like when those verses say, I won't fear death. I don't fear death. I don't mean that arrogantly.
No.
I just have that confidence. And so I believe us walking and doing life, we're seeing this change. We're seeing younger people. We're seeing younger people get a relationship with Jesus. And I want to say to those parents who feel overwhelmed, then let's talk. I just want to say, let's talk. Have that willingness to still learn from a third voice. It could be a coach. It could be this community. It could be somebody. But fight for your children, and that might mean you need to slow down. You need to spend more time with them. That's one thing we've talked about is you alluded to it, more time with your kids, not telling them about Christianity. Our kids are getting really good at Christian behaviors, showing them Christianity.
That's right.
Going on it. One last story, Tyler, you can chime in, is just, again, back to that mission trip where this daughter and her parents got to share the gospel together as we're going in homes. And to have a daughter look at her parents and say, I knew your story, I knew our family story, but I never have gotten to see you share the gospel together like that. Like the whole room just like, oh, like that is the bullseye too.
Yeah.
Like it is we're in this together. It went from like daughter, parent to sister in Christ, brother in Christ. It still is guider and parent, but it's almost like we are now in this life together differently moving forward.
Good.
For him, practically, but spiritually too.
Yeah, it's God who establishes us with each other together in this, in Christ. This is here in the Word.
I love that.
And the hope that we can have is that God has given us discernment. He's given us a conscience. He's put on us the seal of His Spirit. And when we step out obediently and we're going at it with Him, He's going to be there to cover our mistakes. And He's going to prove faithful. And that's really all we have time for. But this was a great conversation. It was great.
Thanks for doing this, guys.
Thank you. Yep, great time, guys.